Renowned for his belief that the narrative and character development are the primary drivers of viewer engagement, Russo consistently prioritized entertainment value over traditional in-ring wrestling. His tenure in WWF, WCW and TNA witnessed some of the most groundbreaking and successful programming in wrestling history, yet, despite these achievements, Russo is often critiqued and even reviled in wrestling circles for his unconventional and sometimes divisive approach to the business. Russo's public persona and communication style have been scrutinized, revealing certain patterns that critics argue point towards a tendency for embellishment or outright lies. A notable habit is his prefacing statements with phrases like, "if I can be honest with you," which paradoxically signals the potential onset of less than fully truthful narratives. Similarly, his assertion, "I'm shooting here with you," in interviews, raises questions about the need to differentiate between honesty and fabrication in what should be a candid setting. Moreover, when Russo teases you with, "you're going to love this one," it often precedes an anecdote that, while rooted in truth, might be significantly exaggerated. This complex interplay between fact and fiction is reflected in Russo's own memoir, Rope Opera, where he acknowledges the dualistic nature of his reputation. In it, he notes how he has been labelled both as the saviour of the WWF and the man who destroyed WCW, epitomising the contrasting views on his impact in pro wrestling. These divergent perceptions highlight Russo's role in shaping not just the storylines of professional wrestling, but also its broader narrative, with his legacy being a contentious and debated topic within the wrestling community to this day. Back in 1992, an aspiring sports journalist and pro wrestling fan wrote an impassioned letter to a lady of great influence. This simple act would prove to be the start of one of the biggest periods of change in the industry's long history. "I needed a job. Like I said, I had a wife, I had a couple of kids, and I needed a job. Somebody by the name of John Arezzi, who had a wrestling radio show, came into my video store and asked if I wanted to do some advertising. That's where I made the connection into wrestling, because quite frankly, I was looking for another career path. I started with Arezzi and we went our separate ways, and I started doing my own radio show, and again, I was trying to build something for a second career." At this time, Vince Russo began hosting a slot on the radio, a short-lived show about all things grappling, fittingly named Vicious Vince's World of Wrestling. The radio show I was doing, Vicious Vince's World of Wrestling, I was paying for the airtime, and I literally was running out of money, so I just wrote Linda McMahon a letter, and I said, "My name is Vince Russo, and this is what I've been doing. This is my background, and I would love any kind of an opportunity." I had no idea Linda oversaw the magazine, but sure enough, Linda McMahon herself called me and then hooked me up with the editor of the magazine. For an extended period, WWF magazine functioned as a kayfabe publication, faithfully adhering to the scripted narratives of professional wrestling. It presented pro wrestlers as genuine individuals rather than just the characters they portrayed on screen. Within its pages, WWF magazine offered a diverse array of content, encompassing wrestling biographies, ongoing rivalries, event previews, editorials, and various engaging features aimed at a youthful readership. Additionally, it featured excerpts from letters sent by fans, primarily expressing their thoughts and opinions about the wrestlers and storylines. Here is an article from 1994 in which questions about The Undertaker were answered by his manager Paul Bearer, neck deep in the gloop of kayfabe, with just a bit more than a smattering of tongue-in-cheek humour. "Biggest thrill in life, when the creatures of the night stand in unison with my Undertaker in the light of the darkness. Best advice ever received, the day my Undertaker was told by the Lord of the Netherworld that the power lies in the urn. If I could have done it differently. My Undertaker doesn't believe in changing the past. Secret talent. My Undertaker likes to keep this quiet, but he's an outstanding tombstone engraver. Hobbies. In his spare time, my Undertaker enjoys building caskets, all shapes and sizes. Favourite video game. My Undertaker adores Dungeons and Dragons. Favourite cartoon character. My Undertaker really gets a charge out of that Beetlejuice fellow. Ooh, yes! Favourite television show? The only two shows that my Undertaker never misses are Tales from the Crypt and The X-Files. Favourite actor? Without question, it's the Crypt Keeper from Tales from the Crypt. Person you would most like to meet? The person he'd most like to meet? My Undertaker would just love to meet Karma in the middle of the ring. Favourite movie? My Undertaker has seen Night of the Living Dead over 100 times. Favourite actress? That's a toss-up for My Undertaker. Oh, years. It's between either Elvira or Morticia Addams. Favourite band? My Undertaker likes to relax to the sound of the Grateful Dead. Favourite fast food? My Undertaker doesn't eat fast food. He only eats burnt food. Favourite food? Before a tough match, My Undertaker enjoys eating either blackened fish or black Angus beef. Extremely well done. Favourite sports beside wrestling? To stay in shape, My Undertaker takes part in competitive grave digging. Russo was initially brought on board as a freelance writer at WWF Magazine, where he excelled in the creative writing aspect of the role, finding it easy to come up with stories for what could be happening behind the scenes. Blending reality with the fictional world of professional wrestling came as second nature. I basically took the skills that I learned at ISUE, and I would write one story a month for about $150. Although soon, Russo's skills and love for pro wrestling saw him quickly rising up the ranks within WWF Magazine, from freelance writer to assistant editor, and eventually, in 1994, Vince Russo became the editor-in-chief of the publication. With his rise came with it Russo's ability to change the magazine and fit it to how he thought pro wrestling-related media should be at the time. As we would later find out, Russo has always loved the grittier, trashier side of sports entertainment, something which would fuel his involvement with the Attitude Era a few years later. However, at this time, Russo's desire for a seedier, more grime-filled presentation begun to seep into the WWF magazine. Over the previous years, the World Wrestling Federation had been connected to more than its fair share of moral and oftentimes criminal accusations, from the nationally observed steroid abuse scandal to several cases including sexual misconduct. Vince McMahon's company courted controversy both on and off our television screens. Vince Russo, meanwhile, saw an opportunity to bring more of the real world into the realm of fictional professional wrestling. The WWF magazine began publishing their side of the story regarding the numerous scandals which they had found themselves in, at one point going as far as to claim, "We have been subjected to tactics bordering on McCarthyism." A first segment titled "Now It's Our Turn" was published and would explain the ongoing contract disputes and legal battles that involved both WWF and superstar Billy Graham. In the article, WWF Magazine disputed their former employee's claims that he was supplied illegal steroids which had later been detrimental to his health, something which was the ongoing cornerstone of Billy Graham suing the company along with the manufacturers of said illegal steroids. WWF's article feels like a hit piece when you read it, even claiming that Graham has never held a regular job, and hints at a conspiracy by Graham to smear the name of Vince McMahon's company. Seemingly, WWF's lawyers got involved and put a stop to Russo and McMahon's new segment, with the idea being dropped by the next month's issue. Later in the year, documents were filed in court which directly related to the article about superstar Billy Graham, which had been published in the magazine, with scans of the pages included in letters sent between WWF lawyers and the New York Post at the time. In the wake of this setback, Vince Russo was quick to enact his next big idea for the magazine. He had already been writing articles titled The Bite as Vic Venom, a hard-talking, no-nonsense and, most importantly, fictional wrestling fan who was featured in the publication with his heated opinions and uncensored views on the wrestling landscape. Around this time, Russo began leaning into the character more, pushing the boundaries of what was allowed to be written, and with it, Vic Venom started to gain some momentum. The character's abrasive attitude and desire to speak his mind, even if it was a negative comment about WWF, led to a period where a fictional feud between Venom and his employer started to heat up. Shortly after, Venom wrote a letter in the magazine announcing his resignation. Also, because I'm the kind of guy that I am sending you the first issue of The Bite, uncensored, absolutely free. What did you ever give away that was free beside those worthless trading cards? This led to a breakaway publication briefly being featured in WWF Magazine, a newsletter which aimed to give Venom his own platform, a novel idea, but one which seemingly fizzled out. Perhaps Russo was just a little ahead of his time. His actions here as Vic Venom was the journalistic version of the New World Order infiltrating WCW a few years later before taking over the wrestling world. The Vic Venom character would appear on WWF television promoting its hard-hitting form of journalism in a promo that featured on Monday Night Raw, but ultimately the man behind the goatee was destined for bigger and better things, soon being moved from his position within WWF magazine to the creative team behind some of the company's most controversial stories over the next few years. Vince Russo rose to prominence in the WWF creative team in 1996, and by 1997 he had ascended to the role of head writer. In a 2015 conversation with Jeff Lane, Russo recalled that his first major task as head writer was scripting the December 15th, 1997 episode of Raw. Over the next 2 years under Russo's guidance, Raw overtook WCW's Nitro in the ratings battle, a notable achievement considering that in the same period, Monday Night Raw experienced a ratings dip. This was during Nitro's 83-week dominance in the Monday Night Wars, a period when World Championship Wrestling was outperforming their rivals. Faced with this challenge, WWF chairman Vince McMahon turned to Russo for a revitalised approach to their show. Russo introduced a range of provocative and boundary-pushing elements to the WWF programming. His storylines were known for their boldness, incorporating sexual themes, profanity, surprise plot twists, and intense rivalries. This approach, reminiscent of the shock value seen in the Jerry Springer Show, led to Russo's style being termed Crash TV. During his tenure, Russo also played a pivotal role in the King of the Ring pay-per-view in 1998, a time at which when he was joined by Ed Ferrara in the WWF creative team. As head writer for the company, Russo was instrumental in shaping Raw is War and the monthly pay-per-views. His creative angles were key in propelling WWF ahead of WCW. Notably, Russo's period saw the emergence of controversial characters like Sable, Val Venus, and The Godfather, and he was the brain behind the Brawl for All tournament. Furthermore, his contributions significantly influenced major storylines and characters, including the formation of D-Generation X, the Undertaker vs. Kane feud, the iconic rivalry between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Mr. McMahon, the rise of The Rock, and the push of all three faces of Mick Foley. Despite his successes, some of Russo's WWF booking ideas were considered extreme. A notable example was his proposal for WrestleMania 12, which clearly reflected his penchant for controversial storylines. In the wake of the O.J. Simpson trial, Russo suggested a highly contentious angle involving Simpson in a match against Fred Goldman, the father of Ron Goldman, who, along with Nicole Brown, was a victim in the case that led to Simpson's trial. This idea, which included the use of weapons like a machete or even a grenade, showcased the lengths to which Russo was willing to go in his storytelling, often pushing the boundaries of taste and appropriateness in professional wrestling. This style was designed to grab viewers' attention and keep them hooked by constantly offering surprising and engaging content. During the late 90s, there was a shift in audience demographics for professional wrestling. The audience began to skew older and sought more adult-orientated content. Crash TV catered to this change by providing edgier, more mature themes. The WWF was in fierce competition with World Championship Wrestling during this period. To differentiate itself and regain lost viewership, WWF adopted the Crash TV style under Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara's watch, which was more extreme and sensational than what WCW was offering. This time period saw a broader cultural shift towards more sensational and reality-based entertainment. Crash TV fit perfectly into this trend, offering a kind of soap opera for adults with its continuous storylines and larger-than-life characters. The shock value of Vince Russo's Crash TV, with its unexpected plot twists and controversial moments, helped to create a buzz around WWF programming, leading to increased viewership. The Jerry Springer Show, popular during the same time as the WWF's Attitude Era, shared several similarities with Vince Russo's Crash TV approach. Both the Jerry Springer Show and WWF Attitude Era thrived on controversy. Often taboo subjects were shown that were not typically addressed in mainstream entertainment. Both shows featured dramatic confrontations, where there were scripted physical altercations in WWF or the verbal and sometimes physical clashes on Jerry Springer. Each show relied on sensational storytelling techniques which exaggerated characteristics about a person and situations designed to evoke strong emotional responses from the audience. Both aimed to appeal to adult audiences, moving away from the more family-friendly content of the time. Both the WWF and the Jerry Springer Show blurred the lines between reality and fiction, making it part of their appeal. The audience was often left questioning what was real and what was scripted. Vince Russo's tenure in the WWF during the late 90s was a pivotal period in the history of professional wrestling, particularly in shaping what is famously known as the Attitude Era. Russo, who became the head writer for the WWF, brought a distinct creative vision that transformed the landscape of professional wrestling, leaving an indelible mark on the industry. The Attitude Era, largely attributed to Russo's creative influence, was characterized by a departure from the family-friendly programming of earlier years. Under Russo, WWF became edgier, embracing adult themes, controversial storylines, and a more aggressive style. Russo's approach to storytelling was heavily influenced by popular culture at the time, drawing inspiration from the shock value and sensationalism of shows like The Jerry Springer Show. Russo infused WWF programming with a similar sense of unpredictability and excitement. This included the introduction of more complex and flawed characters, adult-orientated storylines often involving sex, violence, and profanity. The shift helped WWF reclaim a significant portion of its wrestling audience, particularly young male viewers. One of Russo's most significant contributions at this time was the development of new stars and the evolution of existing characters. Under his direction, wrestlers like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and Mick Foley became household names, their personas resonating with the audience's desire for anti-heroes and more relatable characteristics. Russo's storytelling also brought about iconic rivalries and moments, such as when Vince McMahon and Stone Cold Steve Austin faced off, which became the cornerstone of WWF programming during this period. However, Russo's impact on professional wrestling is not without criticism. His reliance on shock value and controversial storylines often came at the expense of in-ring performance and traditional wrestling stories. Critics argue that Russo's approach devalued the athletic and technical aspects of pro wrestling, focusing instead on short-term ratings boosts. This often led to convoluted storylines, abrupt character changes, and a lack of long-term planning. Vince Russo's style of crash TV always exemplified the idea of living fast and dying young. Working 7 days a week and flying all over the country during one of the most chaotic and intense periods in pro wrestling history would be enough to burn out anyone. Well, almost anyone. Vince McMahon, as we all know, is a freak of nature. He doesn't eat, sleep, or stand still, and those around him have always been expected to match his attitude and pace at work. This led to several times where Vince Russo felt burnt out and emotionally drained. The reason why I left the WWE was, I'm a dad, I'm Italian. When Vince McMahon had just added SmackDown to our schedule, never spoke to us about it, and to me and Ed Ferrara it was a big deal because we took great pride in writing Raw. Now, all of a sudden, you're telling us to write another show and we don't want to water down our work. So I went into Vince's office and we had a heart-to-heart, and I said, Vince, listen, I'm not seeing my family at home. My wife is raising my family by herself. I wanted my wife to be able to move my family to her hometown. I said, Vince, if I have to fly back to see them on the weekends, Evansville, Indiana, I said, if I just have to fly there, but my wife is literally raising my 3 kids on her own, and bro, I'll never forget, without blinking an eye, he looked me straight in the eye and said, Vince, I don't understand what the problem is. Why don't you hire a nanny to watch your kids? I'm paying you enough. Bro, I'm telling you, as soon as the words came out of his mouth, game was over. He told me right then and there, I don't give a shit about you. I don't give a shit about your family. The company is first. Get a nanny. Game over. In October of '99, Russo was replaced by Chris Kresge as WWF head writer after Russo departed the company. So, I had some people at WCW. I had Jeff Jarrett. I had Kevin Nash. I had a couple of people down there. They hooked me up with JJ Dillon. I flew down to WCW that weekend. Now, you got to understand, I knew the minute I got on that plane to go to Atlanta, I was working for WCW. Vince Russo's time at World Championship Wrestling is often remembered as a contentious and detrimental era in the company's history. He moved to WCW in 1999, and it came at a critical time, with many believing his actions significantly contributed to the company's eventual downfall. By this point, WWF had secured a dominant position in the wrestling industry, and the intense pace and success led to both Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara feeling overwhelmed and less challenged than before. As Russo was not under contract with WWF, he explored opportunities elsewhere and initiated discussions with WCW officials. WCW, eager to regain its footing in the wrestling world, saw Russo as a key figure behind its rival's success and was keen on bringing him on board. They paraded everybody in there. You talk about a horse and pony show. I knew they were not going to let me leave Atlanta without signing a contract. When Vince Russo called Ed Ferrara to let him know what he was going to do, Ferrara knew that this would be bad for him. If Russo leaves the WWF, everything is going to fall on my lap. Everything. Well, if they want me to, they can have me. On October 3rd, 1999, Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara signed to WCW. The pair were put in creative control of a company that seemed ready to get back on top. I don't know how Russo flim-flammed WCW by saying, "Hey, I'm the guy who made Vince McMahon. You have to hire me. I need to run your company." On October the 18th, 1999, Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara began their work on making WCW great again, and they had a straightforward method to cure their ailing promotion. The formula consisted of 3 main goals. 1. Bring Crash TV style to WCW. Russo was known for a writing style that emphasized shock value, often at the expense of long-term storytelling and character development. This approach, while initially boosting ratings in the WWE, did not translate well to the WCW audience, who were accustomed to a different style of wrestling presentation. 2. Phase out the older stars. During this time, Ed and I were concentrating on breaking down the old foundation that was in place and building a new one as we saw fit. 3. Give younger, underutilized or misused talent more opportunities. While at WCW, Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara developed a character called Oklahoma, played by Ferrara himself. This character was a direct and satirical imitation of Jim Ross, who was a highly esteemed commentator in WWE at the time and had previously worked for a long time in WCW. During our creative meetings, Ed would do a JR impression and it would pop Vince like every time. I have to remind myself that was the environment back then. No punches were pulled. The portrayal of Oklahoma in WCW not only mimicked Jim Ross's unique style of commentary and his cowboy hat, this element of the character was widely criticised for being inconsiderate and disrespectful. I mean, JR couldn't help it, could he? I swear to God, bro, there was a part of us where it was really an innocent jab at JR, but it's like, okay Vince, you used to laugh at this, now we're on the other side and we are kind of putting it in your face. The issue wasn't the heat from the fans or the competition, it was the hurtful words and how they made JR feel. Numerous individuals in the wrestling community regarded this parody as highly inappropriate and offensive. The portrayal was perceived as a direct and personal affront to Jim Ross, a figure widely admired for his professionalism and significant contributions to the wrestling industry. We never looked at how this was going to affect JR, because that's what we never looked at, because that's the last thing we wanted to do was hurt that guy, which we did. That atmosphere and the environment, that's what really led to the Oklahoma character. Because again, people will believe whatever the hell they want to believe about me. I don't really give a shit what they think anymore, but the reality of it is, I did not have heat with JR. The response from fans was predominantly unfavourable. Although wrestling is known for its controversial and bold themes, the act of ridiculing a real individual's medical condition was viewed as a step too far for many spectators. This approach was criticised as being needlessly harsh and mean-spirited, instead of providing entertainment. Bro, I worked in a sea of sharks. I worked in a world of liars and con men and carnies that would do whatever they had to do to get ahead. They would lie, they would beg, they would steal, and they had no moral compass. JR was the one guy that was always 100% honest with me to my face, nothing behind my back, no political posturing, none of that. That was almost impossible at the level he was at, none of that. That's why I love the guy to this day. This episode significantly tarnished the reputation of Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara. On Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara's first night overseeing WCW storylines, the format of Nitro remained largely unchanged. A moment occurred when Buff Bagwell, after declaring himself the chosen one earlier in the show, faced off against La Parka in a match. Buff's performance was lackluster and half-hearted, showing apparent annoyance. In an unexpected turn, he then approached the announcer's table, seized a microphone, faced the camera, and sarcastically asked, "Russo, did I do a good job for you?" Their goal was to explore new directions that would showcase the talents of the WCW roster to both themselves and the audience. Russo's insistence on being an on-screen character and participating in significant matches added to this controversy. A notable instance occurred on June the 5th of 2000 when Russo entered a steel cage match against Ric Flair, one of the most celebrated wrestlers in the company's history. Confronted by the dirtiest player in the game, Russo was visibly intimidated. The match was intense, with Flair dominating and tearing Russo's shirt off. The situation escalated as Ric's son, David Flair, emerged from under the ring, only to be overpowered by his father. In a dramatic turn, Russo grabbed a ladder, opened a section of the cage and ascended to the top. Followed closely by Flair, their confrontation continued 20 feet above the ring, and as they climbed back down, Ric Flair applied the figure 4 leg lock, seemingly close to victory. At this point, it's worth taking a moment to reflect, I think. We've witnessed the show's lead writer, far from a professional wrestler, engaged in a main event, steel cage match against a true wrestling legend, capable of overwhelming him in reality. We've seen Ric Flair, the genuine wrestler, enter the match accompanied by two of his kids, Beth and Reed. Meanwhile, another one of his children mysteriously emerged from beneath the ring to meddle in the match. This scenario, though wildly bizarre, strangely aligns with the eccentricities of late 90s wrestling. I can kind of get behind it. However, the match's conclusion took an even more surreal turn. Just as Russo seems on the verge of submitting to one of the most iconic submission moves in all of pro wrestling, a cascade of red paint and oil suddenly drenched the ring, creating a shocking, blood-like spectacle. This chaos allowed David Flair to attack his father once again, leading to a soaked Russo scoring a pinfall victory. This moment left me bewildered when I first saw it years ago as a kid. Time has passed, but my confusion persists. And even as I recount this to you now, like a drop of fake blood on a fresh white shirt, that feeling of bewilderment hasn't faded a bit. On July the 9th, 2000, a significant event in wrestling history unfolded during the WCW Bash at the Beach event, marking Booker T's first WCW World Championship win. The outcome emerged from a complex and controversial scenario involving Hulk Hogan, Jeff Jarrett and Vince Russo. Earlier in the evening, a staged incident had occurred. This involved Hogan and Jarrett, where Jarrett was scripted to deliberately lose to Hogan, a plan that was originally devised to navigate around Hulk Hogan's refuse to lose to Jeff Jarrett in real life. Russo's out there, he's got the belt and leaning on the apron, no big deal. I figure he's being a prick because he's mad as hell at me. Jarrett walks out and is walking around. I think he's work. I came out, the roar is electric, the loudest pop of the night. I do the ear thing just to stick it up Russo's ass and show how over I was. 2 or 3 times, Jarrett doesn't get in the ring. I think he's working the crowd and we're going to tear the place down. I got them right in the palm of my hand. When you have them like that, you can fart in the ring and the place will go crazy. Not like pulling teeth with Billy Kidman where you have to work your ass off and there's no reaction. This son of a bitch gets in the ring and lays down. Russo looks at me, climbs on the apron. Fuck you, Hogan. He throws the belt at me. I look down at Jarrett. Is this a rib? Why are they doing this? Jeff goes, you always told me to do what I have to do. He's laying in the middle of the ring and I'm talking to him. Get up and wrestle, let's stick it up this guy's ass. You're one of the boys. You've always said to do what I have to do. I'm doing what I have to do. You're a fucking piece of shit. The incident was designed to shock and intrigue fans, much like previous wrestling storylines, but it backfired. Instead of generating excitement, it alienated many fans who were upset with the blatant blending of real-life disputes into the wrestling narrative. I put my foot on him, they countered it. I took the belt, walked to the back, and said F him. Here comes Russo. He pops up on the monitor. I scream, get Nick, Hogan's son, out of here. I was going to go kill Russo and I didn't want him to see it. Dellinger saw me get my kids out of the building, so he knew I was up to something. I'm waiting for that son of a bitch to come back, and I'm going to unload on him. Half of Russo's boys are watching his back. I'm not going to drop any names, but I saw I had people on my left side watching me. Dellinger grabbed me. Terry, get out of here. No, I've got something I have to say. It's not worth the lawsuit, get out of here. When Russo, later in the event, publicly declared the match null and void, this led to Hogan filing a lawsuit against the company for defamation, although the lawsuit was eventually dismissed. Mike Awesome, related to Hogan, also expressed how the incident negatively impacted his career in WCW. During his tenure in WCW, Vince Russo was known for some controversial and often criticised ideas, one of which was prominently featured in War Games 2000, aptly subtitled Russo's Revenge. This event, broadcast live on Nitro, was marred by convoluted rule changes, overbooking, and a generally chaotic execution. The complexity began with the requirement for the face team members to secure their spots through qualifying matches earlier that night. while the heel team was allowed to arbitrarily add a member during the match. Additionally, tag teams Chronic and the Harris Brothers entered the match together, disrupting the usual participant balance. A significant departure from the traditional War Games format was the introduction of ladder match rules, where the objective was to retrieve a prize from atop a three-tiered cage, a structure that had become a staple in WCW. This replaced the classic double ring, double cage setup. The winner had to not only retrieve the belt from the top, but also successfully exit the bottom cage with it. This iteration of War Games strayed far from what fans had traditionally expected from this iconic match type. The 2000 version saw erratic developments, such as Ernest Miller losing his match spot but participating anyway, only to be quickly eliminated by Kevin Nash. Nash himself was involved in a bewildering segment too, where he appeared to betray his heel teammates, only to reveal it as a ruse. Why? Booker T initially retrieved the title, and Goldberg nearly emerged as the new champion. However, Bret Hart, who was not actually an official participant, intervened by slamming the cage door on Goldberg's head. This action allowed Nash to win and retain the title, adding to his history of controversial moments in WCW. The match was not only difficult to follow, but also suffered from a fundamental flaw: the concept of two teams competing for a prize that only one individual could claim. While the heel team had a somewhat coherent goal of aiding Kevin Nash, the face team faced the intricate challenge of battling their opponents whilst also pursuing their individual championship aspirations. This complexity and lack of clarity contributed to War Games 2000 being considered one of the worst WCW pay-per-views of all time. Growing up, WCW was a staple in our household. By the time I was around 7 or 8 years old, watching the weekly reruns of the episodes had become a cherished routine for me. One of the moments that particularly stands out in my memory, this happened in a highly debated and infamous episode of Monday Nitro due to the unexpected turn of events, with the title passing to someone behind the scenes. It wasn't as if Russo had defeated Booker T fairly or even out-wrestled him. Of course, he was incapable of taking on one of the company's biggest stars toe-to-toe. I was out there in front of the people, I was cutting promos, I was in angles. Me personally, that was the worst part of my job, because it really took away from my writing and my producing. It really did. The match concluded with Goldberg delivering a spear to Vince Russo, propelling him through the steel cage wall. This unintentional exit allowed Russo to claim victory and the world title. However, as an 8-year-old viewer, this outcome was disappointing. It seemed to diminish the stature of the actual wrestlers, portraying them as less competent and weaker. Additionally, it placed Vince Russo, the show's writer, at the forefront of the main event. This focus on Russo overshadowed the more deserving and skilled wrestlers in the company, spotlighting him instead of the talented stars who traditionally should have been at the centre of such high-profile matches. World Championship Wrestling has become known for experimenting with unique and sometimes outlandish match concepts, especially during the late 90s and very early 2000s. Among these were the notorious on a pole matches, which involved placing an object on a pole in the corner of the ring. The first wrestler to retrieve the item would win the match or gain a specific advantage by using whatever was hanging there. These matches are often associated with Vince Russo's tenure in the company, and they were characterised by their unusual stipulations and often comedic or absurd nature. Viagra on a pole match, perhaps one of the most infamous on a pole matches of all time. This involved a bottle of Viagra being placed on a pole at ringside. The match was between Billy Kidman and Shane Douglas on an episode of Nitro. The idea was to play off Douglas's storyline issues with Kidman and add a comedic, if somewhat silly, element to the feud. Judy Bagwell on a forklift match. Another unusual event was the Judy Bagwell on a forklift at the New Blood Rising pay-per-view in 2000. Buff Bagwell's mother, Judy, was literally placed on a forklift at ringside. The match, involving Buff Bagwell and Chris Kanyon, was a twist on the traditional on a pole match and added a bizarre family dynamic to the story. The San Francisco 49ers match. While not exactly an on-the-pole match, this match involved boxes hanging from poles in each corner of the ring, one of which contained the WCW World title. The bout, which took place between Booker T and Jeff Jarrett, was criticised for its randomness and lack of coherence. A piñata on a pole match. This match featured a piñata filled with money suspended from a pole. Obviously, the match was part of a series that stereotypically portrayed Latino wrestlers, and it was criticised for both its concept and cultural insensitivity. leather jacket on a pole. This was a match where, as you guessed it, a leather jacket was the object to be retrieved from a pole. Such matches often involved personal items or symbols of a wrestler's persona or storyline. These on-a-pole matches were often criticised for several reasons. They were seen as relying too heavily on gimmicks at the expense of traditional wrestling storytelling and athleticism. Some of the concepts stretched the boundaries of believability and absurdity, detracting from the sport's legitimacy. The frequent use of on-a-pole matches at this time led to a sense of overkill and reduced the novelty and impact of such stipulations. While these matches are remembered as part of World Championship Wrestling's unique history, they are often cited as examples of the creative excesses that contributed to the company's eventual decline and acquisition by WWE in 2001. The conspiracy theory that Vince McMahon sent Vince Russo to WCW to sabotage it from within is interesting and fun to read about, but is a notable piece of wrestling lore that lacks any credible evidence and is largely considered a baseless rumour within the professional wrestling community. Vince Russo was a significant creative force in the WWF during the Attitude Era, a period known for its edgy and groundbreaking content. He left WWE for WCW in 1999, a time when the company was struggling against its rivals in the ratings war. The timing of Russo's move to WCW, combined with the subsequent decline of the company and the radical changes he implemented there, fueled speculation amongst fans. Russo's booking style in WCW, characterised by controversy and often criticised creative decisions, led to further decline in WCW's fortunes. But there's no concrete evidence to support the claim that McMahon sent Russo to WCW just to destroy it. The theory is largely based on speculation and coincidences rather than factual proof. Russo's move to WCW can be more realistically attributed to professional reasons such as career advancement, creative freedom, or financial incentives, common factors in many career changes. Russo has publicly denied the conspiracy theory on multiple occasions. He has explained his move as a career decision driven by his desire for greater creative control than he currently had in the WWF. Vince McMahon has not publicly addressed this conspiracy theory in any substantial way, which is not unusual given his general approach to not giving credence to baseless rumours. Other industry figures and wrestling historians have generally dismissed the theory as a fanciful rumour. While Russo's tenure in WCW is widely regarded as controversial and having a negative impact, it is typically attributed to his creative style and the chaotic environment in WCW at the time, rather than any deliberate sabotage. In the world of pro wrestling, where storylines often blur the lines between reality and fiction, fans are prone to developing and believing in conspiracy theories. The idea of a covert operation to undermine a rival company makes for a compelling story and fits the larger-than-life narrative style of professional wrestling as a whole. The theory provides a simplistic explanation for the complex problems that led to WCW's decline, which involved numerous factors, including mismanagement, financial issues, and many internal conflicts. When you look at those first 3 months, bro, the ratings are up. The ratings were working, our plan was going according to exactly what Ed and I discussed. We got to erase everything they're doing, we've got to build new people, we've got to build new stars. It was working perfectly. Then of course, bro, politics played its ugly head. I went home, they brought in different people. In the 3 months that we had built, after 3 months, bro, they had brought it right back down to where it was before we got there. Thus, they called me back. Vince, we need you to get back here. Honest to God, at that point when I went back, I knew we lost the audience. I knew there was no way we're going to get the audience back. We had them. We were building for 3 months. Then they went backwards 3 months to the same crap they were doing. It's done. It's over. Obviously, I had to go back because I was contractually obligated, but I knew at that point, bro, we were not going to get these people back again. Vince Russo has claimed in interviews that when he began his tenure in WCW, the ratings were at 2.6 for Monday Nitro, and within 3 months, they had increased to 3.5. Examining Nielsen ratings, a verified television rating system, we find that Nitro did indeed average a 2.6 on October the 11th, 1999, just before Russo's takeover. By January the 10th, the episode preceding his temporary departure, the rating was at 3.4, which is quite close to his claim. However, the context is essential. It's true that the ratings on January the 10th were higher, but this episode was one of the first 2-hour Nitros after a period of long 3-hour shows since 1997. Shorter broadcasts can theoretically achieve higher average ratings more easily than longer ones. Additionally, the ratings during this period from January the 17th to April the 3rd, when Russo wasn't involved, varied wildly, ranging from 3.6 in February to 1.8 in April. This indicates that Nitro's ratings were highly volatile regardless of Russo's involvement. To put this in perspective, consider that on February the 8th, Nitro hit a rating of 5.7 for a 3-hour show, and on December the 11th, the rating was just 1.7 for a 2-hour show. This fluctuation suggests that while there is some evidence of Vince Russo positively impacting the show's ratings, especially during its initial run, this data should be interpreted cautiously. I don't make excuses. I knew what I was getting into, bro, but I didn't think I knew the degree. I don't think I really knew how serious it was. While Russo's tenure coincided with a ratings increase, attributing this solely to his influence is an oversimplification. The ratings of WCW Monday Nitro were subject to a variety of factors and exhibited significant fluctuations during this period. Vince Russo's time at WCW is remembered for a series of contentious events and tactics, often criticised as attempts to create shock value and boost ratings, sometimes created rifts with established WCW stars, leading to internal strife and a sense of discontent among the wrestlers. In evaluating Vince Russo's influence on WCW, the overall assessment tends to be negative. This perception is largely due to his penchant for sensational storytelling, frequent and rapid changes in championship belts, complex and often confusing storylines, and a heavy reliance on non-wrestler figures in prominent roles. These elements collectively contributed to a decline in WCW's quality and appeal at the time, which played a role in the company's eventual decline. However, it's crucial to recognise that the downfall of WCW was the result of many factors, and Russo's stint was just one aspect of a broader set of challenges that the company faced. There wasn't much I enjoyed about WCW. The downfall was strictly business. AOL didn't want to be in the wrestling business. In June of 2002, Vince Russo made a brief return to WWE, stepping in as a consultant tasked with guiding the creative direction for both Raw and SmackDown brands. However, his tenure was fleeting, lasting only 2 weeks. Russo left, citing his belief that the working conditions and creative environment were not conducive to success, famously remarking that there was no way in the world that this thing would work out. So first of all, I had already laid everything out to Vince. I go in that room, I laid out an entire year of programming for that team. They were silent, their jaws hit the ground. They were dumbfounded, and it became pretty evident to everybody in that room. Well, if Vince McMahon hires this guy, there's no need for us. I knew damn well when I left that room, those guys were going to bury me to Vince because what I laid out, they couldn't lay out a tenth of that on their best day. And I knew they knew. Holy shit, if this guy comes in here, there's no need for us, so they go into protect your spot mode. During his short stint, Russo proposed a significant storyline idea, a complete overhaul and revival of the WCW invasion angle. This new iteration was to feature several high-profile, previously uncontracted wrestlers, including Bill Goldberg, Scott Steiner, Eric Bischoff and Bret Hart. Despite the potential of this ambitious concept, Russo's return to the WWE was marred by a sense of discord. A pivotal moment in Russo's decision to depart came following a phone conversation with Stephanie McMahon, which he perceived as disrespectful. This experience, coupled with his dissatisfaction with the creative process, led him to voluntarily exit the company. Notably, Russo chose to forego a lucrative offer from WWE, a $125,000 per year salary for a stay-at-home advisory role, and instead accepted a $100,000 per year full-time position with total non-stop action. This decision highlighted Russo's preference for a more hands-on and involved role in the wrestling industry, even at the cost of a higher salary. In July 2002, Vince Russo became part of the creative team for the NWA TNA, a promotion founded by Jerry and Jeff Jarrett. His role encompassed writing and contributing to the production of the shows. Russo has often stated that he was the one that coined the name Total Nonstop Action. His vision for TNA, being a pay-per-view exclusive at the time, was to present a more provocative and boundary-pushing product than was ever possible with WWE. He acknowledged that the acronym TNA was deliberately chosen for its double entendre, implying tits and ass, to signify this edgier approach. During the initial years of TNA, there were frequent reports and speculations about internal disagreements and a struggle for creative control within the company. These rumours hinted at differing opinions on the direction of programming, with various factions within the organisation pushing for their vision. Amidst this backdrop of rumoured creative tensions, Russo eventually transitioned from a behind-the-scenes role to becoming an on-screen personality yet again. His debut as an on-screen character came under the guise of the enigmatic masked wrestler Mr. Wrestling 3. In a pivotal storyline, Mr. Wrestling 3 played a crucial role in aiding Jeff Jarrett to capture the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. The mystery surrounding this character added intrigue to the storyline, culminating in a dramatic reveal where Mr. Wrestling 3 was unmasked and identified to the crowd as Vince Russo himself. This development marked a significant moment in TNA's early history, blending Russo's off-screen creative influence with his on-screen character work. Vince Russo's creative direction in TNA was characterized by a similar philosophy that he had applied in WWF, often controversial storylines, shock value, and a push towards more adult-orientated content. While this approach had found success in the past, it garnered mixed reactions at best in TNA. Some praised Russo for bringing a fresh and bold perspective to the show, believing it vital for TNA to stand out against competitors like the WWE. However, others criticised his style for being too extreme and accused it of lacking depth and disrespecting the sport's traditional values. Vince Russo's relationship with TNA wrestlers and staff were complex. On one hand, some wrestlers appreciated Russo's willingness to take risks and give them new opportunities and character arcs. On the other side of the coin, there were those who were more critical of his approach, feeling it devalued their in-ring skills and the sport's integrity. This dichotomy created a polarizing environment backstage. Vince Russo, as a person, I love the guy, and we butted heads as far as him writing, even in TNA, but I realised when we butted heads, it was because he was getting things from Dixie the whole time. It must have been very difficult to work with a woman who has no idea how wrestling works and wanted everything to be done to it, and it didn't make any sense. We butted heads with him as a writer, but due to Dixie Carter getting involved a lot with creative. During Vince Russo's time in TNA, his professional relationship with Dixie Carter, who served as the president of the company, played a pivotal role in his career. Carter, known for her unconventional approach in the wrestling industry, valued Russo's innovative thinking and his knack for creating buzz around TNA. However, their collaboration faced hurdles. Amidst struggles with television ratings and financial issues, Russo's creative direction frequently became a subject of debate within the company. This period was marked by internal discord regarding creative strategies, casting doubts on Russo's standing in TNA and the extent of his influence in shaping its direction. When you're working for WWE and TNA, you're working for two different companies based on finances alone. Here's a perfect example. When we were doing the WCW invasion, for the hell of it, I wrote on the show format, DX drives rocket launcher up to building, never thinking in a million years they would get a rocket launcher. I wrote that to entertain myself to see what the prop guys come up with. Next thing I know, DX is driving up in a rocket launcher. We bought a $50,000 sports car to fill up with cement. That stuff makes good TV. If you don't understand that and don't know the difference between WWE and TNA and expect ratings to be the same or close, you're absolutely out of your mind. Vince Russo's tenure at TNA was marked by a series of returns and departures, beginning with his re-emergence as an on-screen character during the May 28, 2003 pay-per-view. In a memorable moment, he attacked Raven with a baseball bat, aiding Gilberti in becoming the #1 contender for the World Championship. Later on October the 15th, Russo had his final appearance of the year in a street fight against Jeff Jarrett. His temporary exit from TNA at this point was rumoured to be influenced by Hulk Hogan's arrival in the company. Reports suggest that Hogan was reluctant to work with TNA if Russo was involved. Russo made a comeback in February of 2004, shortly after it became apparent that Hogan could not commit to TNA. This time, he returned solely as an on-air personality, adopting the role of the Director of Authority in the storylines. Portraying a reformed character, possibly reflecting his real-life religious conversion to Christianity, he projected a much more positive image. However, his on-screen presence was short-lived. Russo exited TNA again in late 2004, following the Victory Road pay-per-view in November. During this event, an interactive election on TNA's website saw Dusty Rhodes chosen over Russo as the new Director of Authority. Reflecting on this period in a 2005 interview, Russo remarked that he never single-handedly wrote any shows and described his experience in TNA as a total nightmare. In a significant development, TNA President Dixie Carter brought Russo back to the creative team on September the 21st, 2006, partnering him with Dutch Mantell and Jeff Jarrett. However, his creative decisions continued to be contentious. This was notably evident during the March 2007 TNA pay-per-view Destination X, where fans in the Orlando arena expressed their displeasure with chants of "Fire Russo" during the Last Rites match between Abyss and Sting. By July of 2009, Russo had ascended to the head of TNA's creative team. Addressing the earlier "Fire Russo" chants, he clarified that he wasn't the head of creative at the time of the criticised matches, and that the electrified steel cage concept, which received negative reactions, wasn't his idea. He often felt blamed for decisions he hadn't made. In September 2009, at the No Surrender pay-per-view, Ed Ferrara joined up once again with Vince Russo to be on his creative team, working alongside Russo and junior contributor Matt Conway, marking another phase in their fluctuating journey. On October the 27th of 2009, TNA brought Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff on board, aligning them with Vince Russo. This collaboration was noteworthy as Hogan and Bischoff had previously experienced conflicts with Russo during their time in WCW, and they hadn't collaborated with him since their departure from the company following Bash at the Beach in 2000. Dixie brought in Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan, and of course, she lied to me from the offset because Dixie lies very much, as part of her persona. She told me the only creative input that Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan were going to have was as it pertained to Hulk's character, and literally within a week, there was Eric Bischoff sitting in on creative meetings, acting like he was the boss. As of October the 6th, 2011, Vince Russo transitioned to a lesser role within TNA, serving as a contributing writer, while Bruce Pritchard assumed the position of head writer. Then, on February the 14th of 2012, TNA President Dixie Carter announced that the company and Russo had amicably and professionally agreed to go their own separate ways. In her statement, Carter emphasized the mutual and respectful nature of the separation, saying, "TNA and Vince Russo have mutually parted ways as of this week. The separation is amicable and professional." In April 2014, reports emerged on the PWI website suggesting that Vince Russo was serving as a consultant for TNA. Initially, Russo refuted these claims. However, the situation took a turn on July the 15th, when PW Insider received an accidental email from Vince Russo which contained directives for TNA commentators. This incident led to Russo to concede on his website that he had indeed been working with TNA, specifically assisting the commentary team under an agreement of confidentiality mandated by Total Nonstop Action. Yet, this admission was short-lived on his website, being removed within 2 days. By July the 30th, 2014, Russo publicly declared that his association with TNA had come to an end. Subsequently, he disclosed that his involvement with the company had actually begun much earlier, dating back to October the 24th of 2013. During this period, he participated in creative meetings and provided critiques of the weekly Impact Wrestling episodes. Russo also revealed that for his consultancy role with TNA, he was compensated about $3,000 per month. "I was at TNA for a good part of 10 years, and there was about 2 months where, as Mr. Bolin would say, I had the book. Other than that, I'll not claim 100% responsibility, simply because I did not have 100% responsibility. If I had it, I would claim it and have no issue with it. When I first started, Jeff Jarrett was in charge of creative, and my job was to bring Jeff as many ideas and as many storylines as I could. That was my job, but at the end of the day, Jeff decided what was on TV and what wasn't on TV. Jeff was the boss. It was me, Jeff, and Dutch Mantell. Then, Jeff was sent home because of the Kurt Angle incident, and there was about a 2-month there where I was literally in charge of writing the TV. Later in 2014, Dixie Carter, the now former president of TNA, acknowledged Vince Russo's talent, describing him as incredibly skilled. However, she also conceded that his involvement in the company ultimately became a source of distraction, which led to the decision to discontinue their professional relationship. Despite this, when questioned about the possibility of Russo's returning to the promotion, Carter has always left the door open, remarking, "Never say never." Several wrestlers who interacted with him during this time at TNA have expressed nothing but positive sentiments about him. Notable among them are Hernandez, Kurt Angle and AJ Styles, all of whom have shared favourable reflections on their experiences working with Russo. Additionally, Velvet Sky and Angelina Love have specifically credited Russo for his support and contributions to the success of TNA's women's division. I want to be clear about one thing: people in wrestling can villainize Vince Russo for his writing and everything all they want, but I'll tell you right now, if Vince Russo walked through that door, I'd walk up and I'd give him the biggest hug, because whether you agree with him or disagree with his philosophies, and me and him had many disagreements, at least to me, there was always respectful debates and discussion. And even after Vince came in, I basically had to start taking direction from Vince, go back to doing that, and executing his vision. And we were able to do that because take all the showbiz away from him and everything else, he's a decent guy. Vince Russo's exit from TNA stirred as much controversy as his time there. His departure sparked debates over creative clashes, the impact on ratings, and the future path of the organisation. Opinions on Russo's TNA legacy are divided. Some applaud his efforts to infuse the promotion with a distinctive and daring approach, yet critics contend that his style was out of sync with TNA's fanbase and wrestling ethos. Vince Russo's reflection on his time in the wrestling business are tinged with a sense of disillusionment. "Pro wrestling lacks morals and really grinds you down," Russo lamented. Speaking from years of experience within the industry, this sentiment underscores the personal toll and challenges he faced during his career, emphasising the often harsh realities of the wrestling world. As one of the most contentious figures in wrestling history, his work has sparked intense debate and polarised opinions. While a segment of the community is critical of his creative decisions, seeing them as detrimental to the essence of pro wrestling, there is also a significant number who admire his boldness and innovation, respecting the risks he took in an industry known for its resistance to change. His legacy continued to evolve long after his time in the ring. His active engagement on social media and podcasts has not only kept him connected to the wrestling world, but also contributed to ongoing discussions about his impact and contributions. This digital presence has opened up new avenues for re-examining his role in wrestling, with some gaining a renewed appreciation for his influence and others holding on to their reservations. Vince Russo's journey through professional wrestling is a testament to the dynamic nature of the industry, marked by constant innovation, debate and change. Russo's influence during the Attitude Era in WWF, known for its groundbreaking storylines and character development, played a significant role in shaping the wrestling industry's trajectory over the next 20 years. However, his tenure in WCW and TNA, and the criticisms it attracted, highlight the complexities of balancing entertainment with the sport's traditional styles. In conclusion, Vince Russo's legacy in professional wrestling is a narrative of bold creativity, controversy, and enduring discussion. His career, punctuated by both acclaim and criticism, serves as a reminder of the transformative power of storytelling in pro wrestling. As the industry continues to evolve, Russo's place in its history remains a subject of lively and passionate debate, encapsulating the ever-changing and often divisive nature of pro wrestling that we love so much. Thanks for watching.